Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We are back with our coach, our friend, and it's Randy Swaim joining us, bringing freedom to potential. And he's here joining us. And I got to give him a happy belated birthday because you just turned a certain age. You would never know. You look like you're 50 only because you got the little scruff here. The white does it. It makes us look a little older. But God bless. I'm shocked to hear that you're a father, grandfather, and all you've accomplished, but you look amazing. How was your birthday celebration?
It was relatively uneventful, but it was good. I was able to relax and take a look at things and all that kind of stuff and just sort of rest and it was really good for that. And
Yeah.
got a chance to when you think about it from a leadership standpoint, thinking about where I'm going from here and what do I want to work on, what are some things I need to think about, and stuff like that and all of that. So um, it was a little bit different. I didn't go out to a big party and do all of this, kind of thing or anything like that. I had a lot of people, and it actually sort of blew my mind, but I had just a ton of people on Facebook, send me messages wishing happy birthday and everything like that. And so I spent a large part of that going down there and just saying thank you to every one of them, kind of thing. So but it was a good day. It was some rest and some thinking and all that. So yeah, it was good.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. Excited. I'm so glad. What did you have in mind for us today?
What I thought I would do is kind of expand it a little bit or extend it a little bit from what we talked about last week with Steve. When I talked about, with um, organizational maneuverability concepts and how all of the aspects that happen are not always just rote academic and you got to be ready for it and things of that nature. And what I thought I would do, and in fact, I saw one or two things this week that made me go, yep. And so what I was gonna I think do is start out with the question for the listeners of how are your managers really making this happen effectively, and 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 that kind of thing. And what I do is I had a couple of examples this week that I saw that just kind of made you go, yep, kind of thing, because they were sort of negative in some respects, and you just got to kind of be aware of that. But the bottom line is when you're talking about a rapidly changing, unpredictable environment where all the factors that are coming on scene are not just what you would expect, what are some things you got to be aware of? What are some things you got to watch out for? Because there are some things that can, and what I'm going to kind of focus on today is a little bit about managerial things, but also talk a little bit about communication and how is your communication uh, with people and everything. Because I tell you what, you can do it in such a way that it just upsets them or it makes them think that why even do this? Just kind of leave it alone, kind of thing, kind of thing. And if you do that in a way with neuroscience, where you sort of shut off their brain thinking and their
Mm-hmm.
processing, guess what? You're not getting the job done. And so,
Yep.
as one of the big roles of a leader and a manager are you have to understand how you're doing it in a negative way with that or how you're really doing it in a positive way with that. And so it's just something to think about. Now, I'll just give you one sort of subtle, sort of quick answer. There was this lady, she was not a manager, but she's like a lead person in her group,
Okay.
kind of thing. And she was acting as a lead person and stuff. But she was talking with somebody in the group, and I sort of observed this. And everything in my mind, because of my neuroscience aspect and because of my organizational maneuverability understanding and all this, when I watched it, everything in me kind of went, "Oh, brother,"
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what was amazing is she was asking one of the people that works with her if they wanted her, and it's a subtle thing, it's a real simple thing, but it's something we want to be aware of, kind of thing. because one of the things she was talking about doing is printing out something for one of her people. And and she looked at him with this very direct looking, thing. And she said, "Do you want me to go do this for you?"
Yeah.
And the person said, "Well, sure."
Yeah.
And with with a real sense of vindictiveness, she had one hand up over her like this, and she was
Mm,
looking straight at their eyes, and she goes like this, and she said, "No, answer it yes or no." And if you ask somebody something and they say sure, that's yes.
yeah.
That's okay. But and right after she said that, that person said, "Well, like I said, sure, sure." And she said, "No, no, ask it yes or no." And she went on with that kind of sort of dysfunctional mindset. And you know what? That is not causing synergy in your team. And that's what those kind of aspects are things that you got to be thinking about when you're seeing your team and you're looking at yourself involvement, not just coming up with superficial things that you think will just take care of you. No, but at what are some of the subtle ways that you have to be aware of how you're really connecting with your team? Because if if somebody receives that from
Yeah.
somebody, guess what? Mentally, they're going to say, "Okay, well, I'll tell you what, no thinking, just forget it, do whatever," kind of thing, and their brain shuts off, and their processing shuts off, and their vision of where it's going shuts off. And so that's just something to think about. And the other part of this too is when you're talking about, the aspect of connecting with your
Mm-hmm.
team and being synergistic with your team. One aspect of that is obviously the communication and how you're either connecting the
Yeah.
synergy or disconnecting it and throwing it in the trash can, kind of thing. And there's a lot of people, and I will say this, that there's some people out there, probably in today's world, I'm guessing, that think that their job is to make it so that they're chuckling or whatever, or maybe get the other person chuckling, because that'll just make them feel good. No, sorry, that's not how that works. And it
Yeah.
wasn't the reaction that this person got. But the other part I'll say on this too is, depending on the environment that you're in, particularly if it's organizational maneuverability, where there's a lot of changes happening, a lot of things that are kind of happening, sometimes you get to a situation where the managers, the real managers, are so busy they cannot even connect with their people.
Yeah.
And and you know what? If that is what your organization is doing, you have to sort of be aware of how you may need to tweak that just slightly. Now, granted, there are some times where the manager has to be very busy. No two ways about it with all that they do, kind of thing. But if you're doing it in such a way where you're assuming that's okay, guess what? What's missing is the sense of
Yeah.
synergy in your team. And so there's a lot of aspects like that. And the big thing that people sometimes don't understand is when you're negatively impacting the synergy and that sort of oneness together that people have a sense of, from a neuroscience standpoint, the oneness, the teamwork, and all of that really goes in the trash. And the other part of it too is their mental processing goes in the trash, because one of the things that they're probably thinking about is, okay, how do I just avoid this with them? How am I going to do that?
Yeah.
When you don't want that. And so it's just something to think about when you're talking about having to lead your team and your group in a rapidly changing environment. And also, if you're just one of the people on your team and not the actual leader, how are you going to interact with people in such a way that that really gets built, and you can have that positive oneness there? Because guess what, you can lead. That doesn't mean just telling people what to do, but by modeling things and
Oh
and
yeah.
connecting with people, in a challenging situation, in a challenging time, in a challenging environment,
Mm-hmm.
connecting with with people in such a way that they have a vision and a picture of what's really possible in this. And
Yeah.
you know what? They're working on it in their mind and they're getting it there. And that's something to think about. But you know what? Like I say, if you have somebody where I'm your boss today, but you know what? We haven't said anything for about 2 weeks because I've been so busy. Guess what?
Yeah.
Not getting the job done really on that. And there are times where you got to come in, and if nothing else, just have a quick, couple of minute conversation with somebody that's
True.
positive, kind of thing, and connect with them in a way like that. And when you do that, if you think about that, if you do it in the dysfunctional way that I just kind of mentioned there, what people do is their vision and their processing and all that gets thrown right into the trash.
Uh,
Their whole processing is, how do I want to avoid what you're doing? How do I, golly gee, kind of thing. How do I defend myself from this junk, and that kind of stuff. But if there's a subtle positive aspect of it, what you find is some of the people on your team, as they're engendering their neuroscience processing in the frontal lobe here, what happens is they may come up with a couple of solutions that nobody else on your team, including the manager, including the bosses, never thought of yet.
yeah.
And when they bring it up to the boss or something, or the rest of the team, everybody goes, "Oh, wow, yeah, yeah," kind of thing. And that doesn't happen when you're shutting people down and when you're, just, doing that kind of stuff. So it's just something to think about, that when you're talking about really leading your team in a challenging environment, because you know what, like we said, I said this several times along our journey, but last week I mentioned it also because we were talking about, you know, on organizational maneuverability, on any strategic plans that you have. Guess what? There's factors that are going to come on scene that you never expected. What do they look like? And in fact, just telling people what to think and say is not the right way to lead. What you do, really more so, is you ask them some great questions
Mm-hmm.
that get them to process the solutions. Now, if the solution is a little bit different than what you've already strategically thought of, guess what?
Yeah.
You may amend yours a little bit because it has one factor in there, but you might also help that person understand how they bring that together with the strategy that you came up with. And so all of that can be a positive thing in that. But it's just, like I say, it's just something that a lot of people don't realize. If you're making it so that your manager is so busy, they can't even ever really have positive interaction with their people, kind of thing. Uh, you're hurting your own the situational awareness and the synergy and the teamwork and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that managers and leaders have to do is to lead that degree of oneness in their team. And if
Mm-hmm.
and so it's just something to think about on that. And like I said, part of it is in the way you communicate also. If
Yeah.
you communicate it in such a way, like I mentioned, I saw that one person do, that was extremely dysfunctional, because the person she talked to about that, when she said, "Well, do you mean yes or no?" He looked at her again. He said, "Sure." She said, "Yes or no?" Well, when she asked the question,
Yeah.
he said, "Sure," which means, okay, yeah, I'm in agreement with that. Let's do that.
But
But she just disconnected from that to go into this other aspect of it. And so it's just some things to think about, that when you're talking about truly leading your team, it's not just playing games and it's not just trying to create unexpected things to happen so that you can just play the game, play control freak games, or whatever, make it, connect with people in such a way that they believe in how you see them and how you experience them and how you believe in them as
Yeah.
your teammate, and you're not disconnecting from that. So it's just something to think about. Like I said, it's just something that I saw, but it's a little bit of it's strictly a leadership aspect of it. But it's something that, like I said, came out of that was like within about the last week, and but it's since we had the last session here and stuff. And I said, organizational maneuverability and those unexpected factors. Guess what? As a leader or as somebody who's even uh, being kind of a leader on your team, guess what? When unexpected factors come on, do you have your team developed so far that you're not just trying to get them to just capitulate to you and shut everything off? Or are you truly building their insight? And are you helping them get a sense of it? Now, are there times when you need to have them just accept what you're strategizing for this? Yeah, there are, depending on the craziness of it or the situation and the unexpectations of it and all that. But when you're talking about leading your team, how you do that is everything, because you can do that in a way that is grossly negative and totally dysfunctional in your team, or you can do it in such a way that makes them grow and they go, oh, okay, yeah, you know what, they believe in me and they like me, and you know what, I see what that's saying, let's do that. And so how you do those things and how you're avoiding the dysfunctional aspects of it is everything when you're wanting to truly grow your team to be successful in rapidly changing, unpredictable environments. And there have been a couple of teams along couple of times along my journey.
Yeah.
I had to do that because the situation was not just obvious, but when I connected with the team and communicated with them in such a way that they believed it, and
Yeah.
uh, they kind of went with it. In fact, I think I mentioned this in the show that we were together on. You can nod your head if you remember it. I don't know, but this
Yeah.
was
Tell me.
about 30 years ago. But the team that worked for me at an Air Force base was coming up with some unique situations that they were sort of envisioning. And I was standing there. I was the boss, and I was standing there. I was hearing where they were going. Now going, you know what? That's a good thought process they're following there. Good, good. Well, what happened is one guy who was a friend of mine, and we both were F4 people in the military and everything, but he kind of was going over to write some notes down. And I don't know if you remember me saying this or not before, but he suddenly realized that the boss was in the room standing right there. And he went, oh, he was sitting down and he froze and he
Hmm.
just looked up at me since I was a boss. And all I did was I looked at him and I winked at him and I nodded my head.
Oh my
And
gosh.
he just smiled and sat down. Because what I told him was, yeah, you're going in a good direction. Good. Keep going and stuff. But it's just the aspect when you're talking about the unexpected, unpredictable, rapidly changing environments that happen so often today. It's not just about controlling your people and dictating and making them shut their mental processing off
Mm-hmm.
and throwing it in the trash can or anything like that. But it's interacting in them with them in such a way that that now if it's something that's not good, guess what? If you communicate it right and ethically and professionally, guess what? They'll probably get a sense of that
Seriously.
and all that. But the bottom line is when you're talking about that aspect of your team, you got to be aware of that. And like I said, when I saw this one sort of kind of leader on her team do what she did, everything in my brain and my mindset went, yep, that's goofy. In the way she was doing it, because she was not connecting with her cohort there in such a way that it was positive. And so when you're talking about leading your team, not only do you need to lead your team and model it, but you need to develop them in a way where they're not just shutting their brain off and just kind of going along this, as you said, but they're actually can engaging their mental processing, and so they can understand it. Because that guy, when he looked at her and said, "Sure, guess what?"
Yeah.
That's one way of saying yes.
Yeah.
But it's just something to think about when you're talking about this aspect of communication and leading your team and really building the oneness, the synergy, and the success, as opposed to just going through some rote academic thing where you're trying to get them to just be completely dependent on you and everything. And that that's just one thing I saw this week, but it sort of dovetails out a little bit about what we talked about last time with uh, with the previous thing there, because that one was real about strategic planning and strategic thinking. This one was much more about the real leadership aspect in that specific kind of environment. So it's just something to think about that people that are in leadership roles need to have some awareness of. And how are you doing it right?
Yeah.
Not just to applaud yourself, but truly doing it right. And how do you need to improve what you're doing to truly make the oneness, synergy, and success happen? And that oneness and success isn't just what you do externally, but it's what comes from inside of you as a team. And that's what a lot of people forget. So just something to think about.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever, nowadays, like this world is so, I mean, it's different. Now, with all these, you have a birthday coming up, milestone, you are well educated, obviously. You're just wiser about amongst most people. What do you think? This is a parenting question. Growing up now, kids today, right?
Yep.
How are we going to let and make without making our kids though make better choices to be successful people? I just feel like this generation has lost a little touch with that.
I think you're
And
right.
I mean, you though, having all this knowledge, what would you do different now? Maybe with your grandkids, like
And
what do you suggest? Because as a parent, I just feel like the world is. I don't think people are going to be like you and I many years from now. Is what I'm trying
yeah,
to say. I
they
just
they can
don't.
they can be, but they probably won't be. Yeah, that's right. But let me just to answer your question, let me just share this with you, because you can go, if you would like, or anybody else that's listening would like to, they can go on my website and read um the last blog that I put in there, which is on rising stars, youth, kind of thing,
Yeah.
because in that blog, I answered the
Oh.
question you're talking about. Now, just give you a
Oh,
picture of
yeah. I
this.
didn't even read it. Okay, go ahead. It's just random
Well,
thinking.
you probably didn't know it was out there, but just one thing to think about. But I will say this: that this is the short answer to your question, and one of the phrases that I have put in some blogs and also have mentioned to people is that true leadership is more caught than taught.
Yep.
And that's what a lot of people don't realize. But you remember I shared this story because the my great granddaughter, um, her mother was very abusive and everything. So about 10 years ago, the father divorced her, and because of the evidence and the legal evidence of it and everything, the uh, the father was giving exclusive custody rights of the kids. The mother
Mm-hmm.
was only allowed supervised visitation,
Yep.
and so but I will say this, and I think I shared this with you one time before, but there was one time right after they had moved out and moved into his mother's house just to kind of have a place to stay for a short period and stuff, and he called me and he said, you know what? Hallie had been sitting on my knee for 2 hours crying, and all she was saying is, "Why doesn't mommy love me?" Kind of thing like this. And at the time, she was about 4.5 to 5 years old, kind of thing. And and what's amazing on that, um, I asked him, and talking about this aspect that you're referring to, and also a coaching approach, I asked him, I said, well, let me ask you this, Jeff, how did you respond? And he said, you know what? Because she sat there crying for 2 hours, kind of thing. And he looked at me, well, didn't look at me because we were on the phone, but he said, well, I didn't say anything. I just sat there with her and held her. He, and I said, Jeff, you did it exactly right. And he said, really? I said, yeah, because you didn't badmouth anybody, you didn't speak evilly of anybody,
Mm-hmm.
but what you did is you spent you helped your daughter experience for 2 hours that she didn't have to go through tough times alone. And I
Wow.
said, she got a sense of that. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, that's what you did. So you did it awesome, buddy. And he was appreciative of that. But one of the things that I have in this blog is that, and this is a short answer to your question, but one of the things that has been so amazing in her life, and I think my great grandson's life too, is the fact that what they experienced. It's not about the parents just came and talked to them and told them what to do and told them how to think or anything like that. They just connected with them and helped them experience the truth and the
Yeah.
reality. And what happened is this young lady who now is 14 years old.
Wow.
I'm sorry, 15, I think, kind of thing. But she's because she just got her last birthday in May. So, but she um, but she is doing amazing in her
Mm-hmm.
thinking. She wants to go be a nurse uh, uh, for her career and everything. But she also last year she also went and joined the track team for her high school. And what she did is she became a track runner, and she did some amazing things. She made some amazing results. And what was amazing is right at the end of the year, the head coach of the track team, she came up and called Hallie up, and Hallie went up there, and I got two pictures that are her standing there. And what happened is the 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 coach is applauding her, as is the audience, and she was awarded two awards for her
Wow.
experience in track and everything. And so, you know what? She has learned to overcome. She has become a strong person. She has become a person who has insights, who has, the vision and the mental processing ability to understand situations that are happening and things of that nature. She has all of that, but
Yeah.
the way that she got that is not just somebody telling her what to do or telling her how to think,
Nope.
but the way that all of us adults connected in with her, and she experienced the difference. So like I said, that leadership aspect is much more caught than taught. And she, with what she experienced, she kind of began to get the experience of this truth, and she brought it into herself as she learned about that. And so it's just, when you're talking about youth and rising stars, that's one aspect that people have to get a sense of. And that's also true with people that you work with. That's actually not disaligned with what I said earlier in the
Yeah.
in the meeting today. It's an aspect of how you're really connecting with your people, instead of doing it dysfunctionally, but truly connecting with people and not
Yeah.
just telling them what to do, but that experience of it and all. Because like I said, true leadership in you, your teams, or your rising stars, true leadership and true growth is caught rather than taught. Now, are there some things that you got to teach? Yeah, but it's caught rather than taught. And so
Got
that's
it.
that's kind of the answer to your question. So just something to think about.
Thank you so much. You have a fantastic day, and we'll talk again next week. Thank you so much. As always, how do we contact you?
Well, you can go to my website, coachingforrelevance.com, and or you can, and on the front page there, it also has my cell phone and my email address. Somebody can send it. As you know, I don't do sales pitches. I mean, if somebody
Mm-hmm.
has a need, yeah, we'll come up with something. But if they just want to have a chat, we can do that. And
Beautiful.
so
Thank you
it's
so much.
and it's always an honor to be with you here, Jill.
Ditto. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day, sweetheart. Enjoy the 4th, the extended holiday weekend. And thank you for being such an amazing person. And happy belated.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.